All right. Today, we're diving into a fight that completely shook up the galaxy. And this isn't just another underdog story, no. This was a masterclass in strategy, a perfect example of how you can win a fight that seems impossible just by changing the rules of the game. So, to really get what happened, you have to start with what was basically an absolute law of physics in the combat world. The champion, Goroth, he was untouchable. And look, that's not just hype. That's a direct quote from the guy who saw every single one of his fights up close.
To truly understand just how massive this upset was, you first have to appreciate the sheer, overwhelming dominance of the champion. I mean, this guy wasn't just a good fighter. Goroth was seen as a force of nature.
And the physical mismatch, well, it was frankly ridiculous. On paper, this was never supposed to be a real fight. It was a statistical certainty. You've got Marcus Webb, the human challenger, who was just completely dwarfed by the crediting champion Goroth.
73. Just let that number sink in. That was Goroth's winning streak. 73 straight wins against the absolute best fighters the galaxy had to offer.
And what about losses? Zero. A big, fat zero. An absolutely perfect, unbroken record in one of the most brutal sports imaginable.
But this is the most important number of them all. 0. That's how many times he had ever been cleanly hit in his entire professional career. Not just in a single fight, but ever. His defense was considered literally flawless.
So, who in their right mind would ever even think about stepping into the ring against a perfect record like that? Well, this is where the human anomaly comes into play.
So the challenger, Marcus Webb, he came from a species that was kind of new on the galactic scene, but they'd already gotten a reputation for being, well, unpredictable, incredibly adaptable, and let's just be honest, kind of weird.
And this pre-fight quote from Webb, it tells you everything you need to know about his whole mindset. He wasn't just being confident, he was flat out suggesting that the untouchable champion was the one who was going to need a medic on standby. The sheer nerve of it.
Okay, so the bell rings, and in the time it takes you to take a single breath, the entire foundation of the sport, everything everyone thought they knew about fighting, was just completely blown to pieces. Before Goroth's legendary perfect defense could even twitch, Marcus Webb landed 5 clean, undeniable, textbook perfect hits. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The impossible had just happened 5 times in a row. The reaction was just pure, collective shock. You could have heard a pin drop. 15,000 fans, who all showed up expecting to see another easy victory, were just frozen in stunned silence. They'd just seen the unthinkable.
Now here's the thing, this wasn't just about being physically fast. What we were all watching was a totally new kind of strategy at work, something the sport had literally never seen before.
So that's the big question, right? How was this even possible? How in the world do you land 5 punches on a fighter whose reaction time and defensive instincts were supposed to be perfect? Well, the answer is in this idea right here, the cognitive loop. It's the simple mental process that we all go through to react to anything. First, you observe something happening. Then you orient yourself to it. Then you decide what to do, and finally, you act. It's always in that sequence. And this quote just brilliantly lays out the genius of his whole strategy. See, Webb wasn't trying to outpunch Goroth's muscles, he was outpacing his brain. He was feeding Goroth new information, a new punch from a new direction, faster than Goroth's mind could finish that loop. So by the time Goroth's brain was processing that first hit, the second and third were already landing. He basically created a cognitive traffic jam. He totally overwhelmed Goroth's ability to think. So let's jump to the end of the fight and see how this revolutionary strategy actually played out across the whole match.
The final stats, they are just mind-blowing. They tell you the entire story of this fight. Webb landed over 80% of his strikes. That's a number that should be impossible against any pro fighter, let alone the undisputed, untouchable champion of the galaxy.
The fight ended pretty decisively with the TKO, but get this, the final moment wasn't some brutal knockout. It was this incredible act of sportsmanship, where Webb actually caught the falling champion to keep him from hitting the mat hard.
And that right there, that moment, is what sealed this fight's legendary status. Goroth, a champion known for his ice-cold dominance, walked all the way across the arena, beaten and battered, to shake his opponent's hand. It was a sign of respect that nobody had ever seen from him before.
Later, in his post-fight interview, Webb explained that his victory wasn't just about some clever technique.
It was about something fundamental to being human, a stubborn, bone-deep refusal to accept that something is impossible.
So when you boil it all down, what's the big lesson here? It's that the most powerful weapon in a fight might not be your strength or your speed, but your ability to control the flow of information. This fight was won by turning the mind itself into a weapon.
This whole historic event leaves us with a really fascinating question to chew on. A species that pretty much evolved by refusing to die when the universe said it should is now playing on the galactic stage. So what happens next, now that this new variable has been thrown into the mix? Well, one thing's for sure, things are about to get a whole lot more interesting.